He's about 80 years old, and he's getting a bit creaky in his joints. He is arguably the rarest animal in the world. Certainly there can be none rarer, for he is the last of his kind. But he's a very important animal. Probably more than any other single creature, he's focused the attention of the world on the fragility of our environment.
Today is Monday, November 14th, 2022, and the truth about voting in America today on the show, ladies and gentlemen. GOP establishment wants to push forward with leadership votes despite calls to delay, and the Democrat Party just lost their number 2 donor as crypto company collapses. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. Okay, let's start with an update from Kari Lake in Arizona. A drop last night got us more data and a dire warning there in the sunny state of Arizona. I spent all week there. I spent weeks in the war room with Kari Lake's team and with Tyler Boyer and with Charlie Kirk. Tyler Boyer being the RNC committeeman from Arizona, and Charlie being, of course, Charlie Kirk. They promised me that the math was on our side and that we were ready to go and win Arizona. And I want to win Arizona, and we need to compress what happened and tell you the truth about where we are currently. 94% of the ballots have been tabulated in Arizona. There is another 100,000 ballots that still have yet to be counted, but the big drop was last night, and Kari Lake won 54% of that drop. That might seem good, except for she needed to win around 65%. So she was way off on what she needed to win. Unfortunately, this means that we are in a dire situation. Katie Hobbs is up by around 25,000 votes still, and it is a dire situation now. There's another non-provisional ballot drop estimate at 7 p.m., but there are warning signs flashing right now in Arizona, and this seems like a shock to you. This seems like a shock to me. Weren't all the polls saying that there was great energy behind Kari Lake? This is very strange. Didn't we show you polls, and we brought Kari Lake on this program and demonstrated to you that heavy pollsters had her up by double digits, 10 and 11 points? Kari Lake literally responded to those polls on our program no less than 10 days ago. So what were we doing? Were we lying to you? Of course not. The data was there. The energy was there. We showed you many videos of Kari Lake drawing massive numbers, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to audiences and when it comes to filling arenas and when it comes to having energy on the ground and energizing the voter. Katie Hobbs, on the other hand, was barely able to fill the rec room at a senior center that had a COVID-19 outbreak. Katie Hobbs was unable to fill the Chick-fil-A line worth of people for her events. They were depressing. They were pathetic. Katie Hobbs was a terrible and is still a terrible candidate and refused to debate Kari Lake. This is leading to Tucker Carlson to ask Katie Lake, ominously, before the election, Democrats don't seem panicked about this. It seems as though they have this thing wired. What's going on in Arizona? Kari Lake still has a path to victory. Kari Lake needs to win at least 70% of all of the outstanding votes in order to overtake Katie Hobbs. This is possible. It is not insurmountable, but it is a very scary position. Kari Lake, based on all of the available data, should have been, and all of the traditional data, should have been a wide margin leader by now and unable to be caught by Katie Hobbs. But unfortunately, it is actually the other way around. And Kari Lake is the one who is trailing behind and not able to hit her numbers and seeing the mathematic possibilities of becoming governor wane. Now, I'm not trying to be a doomer, but I am trying to do what we've done on this show every single day, which is to give you the raw facts. So the raw facts on the ground were this. Katie Hobbs ran a Joe Biden campaign, and there's a reason why she did that. And we cracked the code, ladies and gentlemen, and we will explain to you now a dire and important warning about how elections are run in America and what Democrats have done to break our elections, and how Republicans better modernize immediately or doom themselves to be in permanent minority forever. Now, there are two reasons why we could be the permanent minority forever, and we're going to discuss those next. But let me just state this. Katie Hobbs ran a Joe Biden campaign. She campaigned effectively from her basement. She campaigned with no energy. She didn't try and convince voters. Katie Hobbs was asked by a Latino reporter. We should have pulled that clip. Katie Hobbs was asked by a Latino reporter, what do you like about Latinos? They're a third of the electorate. And she didn't have a damn thing to say. Katie Hobbs was a terrible candidate. Katie Hobbs couldn't get past square one when it came to energizing voters or convincing voters. But what Katie Hobbs had on her side was ballot algorithms. She had mail-in voting. She had ballot harvesting on her side. And she had a broken election system in Arizona that benefited her. We're not saying this was fraudulent. In fact, that's the problem. And we're going to get into this right now because we need to have a come to Jesus moment as a party as to how we message this. It isn't fraud if it's legal. Should it be legal? No. Has it broken our elections? Did they use COVID-19 to break our elections? Yes. But were they planning on doing this well before COVID-19? Of course they were. And we have the receipts. My dear viewer, Democrats have been on this game and on this ploy for a very long time. And if you understand that Democrats want our elections to be hackable by their managerial class, and that they have worked for decades in order to make them so, then you will understand why John Fetterman is a future U.S. Senator. You will understand why a man who is brain damaged, can barely walk, is clearly suffering from dementia, is currently in the White House and is doing a victory lap during the 2022 midterms because they didn't get wiped out. And you will understand why every day that goes by, Republicans start to lose more and more and more in these states, which count their ballots into infinity, like Arizona, Nevada, California, Oregon, and Washington. We have the laws before us here, and we're going to talk about exactly what happened, how Democrats broke American democracy and made this not about the voter and not about convincing you of anything, but about ballot algorithms, ballot harvesting, and the future of universal mail-in voting federally, making it a federal right to ship out universal voting ballots. I'm going to start here with an important and extremely depressing reality, which is that we have lost the Senate. This happened late on Friday. We lost the Senate. We have the results here from Mark Kelly winning in Arizona over Blake Masters, a friend of the show, someone who's been on the show, and someone who we care a lot about. Blake Masters lost his Senate seat by 100,000 votes. 100,000 votes and change. This was could have been an easy win if the GOP had a smart strategy. But as the days go by, and as the Democrat strategy of capturing the post-election day vote, which is what they call it. Nate Cohn, the data analysis from the New York Times, calls it the post-election vote. What the hell is that? That sounds illegal. Well, you'd be shocked to know that not only is it legal, it's the strategy for Democrats. And so we must, again, take a moment, pause, gasp, and live inside of the reality of what has been created now by the Democrat Party, breaking our votes and breaking, in fact, our very systems of government in order to benefit them in a permanent majority. It happened also in Nevada, where Adam Laxalt, who was supposed to win that seat, Adam Laxalt was somebody who had that seat on lock. Now, what do we mean by that? Adam Laxalt is somebody who is polling 3, 4, 5 points ahead of Cortez Masto there in Nevada. And Adam Laxalt was ahead on Election Day. And when Election Day closed and when the polls closed, Adam Laxalt was ahead. But in the continuing days, his lead was eroded, much like Donald Trump's was in 2020. And soon he was overtaken. How did it happen? What is the system? The cheap and stupid way of looking at this is just to scream that it's fraud. But in fact, the realities betray exactly what is happening here. And not only is it legal, it is terrifying. Let's begin. Democrats have wanted mail-in balloting for decades. They have worked very hard to get mail-in balloting in swing states for a long time, and they were successful in states like Oregon and Washington. They were successful in states like California. Mail-in balloting, ladies and gentlemen, is the process of shipping ballots to all voters in a state, every voter in every state. So if you are a living human being and a resident, it doesn't matter. Actually, we looked this up. If you're in California and if you're homeless, you still get a ballot. Now, we just went to LA and we just walked through some of the largest homeless encampments in the world. It was truly repulsive third world conditions. At least thousands, maybe tens of thousands of homeless people we saw gathering block after block after block in Los Angeles, downtown, Skid Row. They all got ballots. Where did they go? To the piss-filled tents on the side of the road? Ladies and gentlemen, Democrats have been open about their desire to get as many ballots as freely out in the open as possible. It is a two-part dance here as to how this works. Get as many ballots into the system as possible, into the hands of Democrat voters, and then have the mechanisms to gather those ballots, known as ballot harvesting. But there are a lot of different forms of that, and we're going to go through them. Ladies and gentlemen, H.R. 1, what is it? We'll put the bill up on screen for you right now. H.R. 1 is what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats tried desperately to get passed as soon as they got into control of Congress in the year 2020. This was the first bill put forward as Biden had the pen to sign laws. What does this bill state? Well, it is a total federal overhaul of elections, but most importantly and most effectively, this bill provided that mail-in balloting would be something that happened across America. Reading to you Section 1621. The bill states the following: an individual in a state is eligible to cast a vote in an election for federal office. The state may not impose any additional conditions or requirements on the eligibility of the individual to cast a vote, such as by absentee ballot or by mail. It is true that the permanent federal vote by mail balloting is the top line purpose of H.R. 1. Now, thank God this did not get passed. And it didn't get passed because of people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema in the Senate. And we have to give credit where credit is due, even to Democrats. The two of them possibly saved our country forever. This is the goal. The goal is to get as many ballots out to voters as possible. Now, again, this encompasses homeless people. This encompasses people who just don't vote. There are millions of Republicans and millions of Democrats who just choose not to vote every single cycle. It's they're either too busy, or they show up like in Arizona and the voting machines have been broken. This is what happened in Arizona. And they say, you know what? I can't stand in a line this long. I got work to do. Again, we're going to get to the Republican strategy soon, because the Republican betrayal on this issue is precisely why you should be mad at party elites and not at Donald Trump. There is a major movement to try and scapegoat Donald Trump here, and that is as lazy as just calling all this fraud, because it's not. It's legal in these states, and we have it before you. Not only does Nancy Pelosi want to make permanent mail-in balloting a thing, thank God it looks like the Republicans will hold on to the House with a 5 or 6 seat majority. That is very thin. We are hearing rumblings this morning of many people trying to protest McCarthy for leadership and run against McCarthy for leadership, including Andy Biggs of the Freedom Caucus, which would absolutely torpedo McCarthy's chances of being leader, and he does not deserve to be leader after these results. But ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that mail-in balloting and ballot harvesting is legal in many states. There are states with automatic mail-in ballots. Here are the states: California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, New Jersey, Oregon, Utah, Vermont, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. These are states that allow, or actually, literally, without your permission or consent, mail you a ballot. Now, something anecdotal from Washington, D.C., because I lived there. I lived inside of a home that was my home for 5 years. I bought a house on Capitol Hill in a pretty bad neighborhood. We got shot at a few times. We had our house actually literally burned to the ground. Couldn't live in it because of a drug feud. But nonetheless, we were happy to just have our little patch of earth there in the ghetto in Washington, D.C. My wife and I brought our first child home there, and we were happy to live there. And we had lived there for a pretty firm amount of time. 5 years is how long we had lived in that home before we decided to move to Florida after these terrible things happened to us. Ladies and gentlemen, when 2020 election ticker came around and the mail-in ballots went out, I personally received nine mail-in ballots at my home. 9 for different residents who had lived there in the past, going all the way back to previous owners of the home 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. I received 9 mail-in ballots. One of my coworkers at the time, who lived inside of a group house, received over 20 mail-in ballots in Washington, D.C. This is the plan. As many ballots out as possible. Make the ballots and the individual vote as worthless as the paper that is printed on. Then, the collection mechanisms. States that allow ballot harvesting. And we are going to define ballot harvesting as your ballot is returned by someone other than you. That is how this program will define ballot harvesting. This list is going to shock you. Alaska, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey, North Dakota, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Virginia, West Virginia. You may have somebody return your ballot. Doesn't matter if you were sitting there with dementia in the nursing home. You can just drool and tap on a piece of paper or ring your little bell, and somebody else can grab your ballot and return it in these states. This is ballot harvesting. So what Democrats have is a system where an unspecified person may return the ballots for anyone who gets a ballot, and all Democrats have to do then is match the algorithms. Know where your voters are, which is very simple for Democrats because they live inside of instead of Republicans who live like one voter per square mile in a state like Iowa, right, where everyone's really spread out. Democrats live tightly packed urban centers by and large. They live on top of each other in apartment buildings or in dorm rooms, and it is very easy to go there and to harvest those ballots. And again, we are very sad to report to you, legally harvest those ballots because these states allow it. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of red states allow ballot harvesting, and they are next on the menu. They are on the prefix menu, and they are ready to be gobbled up. You are seeing that in the consistently red state of Arizona. Now you are watching the redness of Arizona erode and collapse due to these practices. Benny, how is it possible that Kari Lake beats, forgive me, reversal there. How is it possible that Katie Hobbs beats Kari Lake? Kari Lake is up in the polls. Kari Lake actually campaigned. Kari Lake actually debated. Kari Lake was on TV every night. Kari Lake was beloved by the voters. This is how. Ballot algorithms. It has nothing to do with the individual voter. It has everything to do with the mass balloting and the managerial class of the Democrat Party figuring out their algorithms. And the algorithms simply mean this nursing home has this many registered Democrats, and we're going to send someone in there in order to get those ballots. Is it fraud? Is it rigging? Is it irresponsible? Is it wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, whatever you think of it, it's legal. So let's start living in reality here as a Republican Party. What happened in Arizona? Well, one, the election day machines broke down. According to official sources inside of Maricopa County, some Alex, some unbelievable amount of polling locations, get me the exact amount of polling locations that had catastrophic issues, broke down, thus affecting the amount of people who would vote election day. What are the official numbers? Well, it was astronomical. And what was the effect on a election day voter? Well, it was very bad for Republicans. And the reason why is because we as a party messaged to people, you must vote on election day, vote on election day, vote on election day. Whereas the Democrat Party tells their people to vote by mail. That is why 57% of John Fetterman's votes were cast before he went out and debated like a cadaver, mouth-breathing cadaver on the debate stage with Dr. Oz. You remember the clips. Hello. Good night, everybody. You remember those clips? You remember him talking about fracking? I do. I don't support fracking. I do. I don't support fracking. These are quotes from the future senator of Pennsylvania. Why did he win? Because over half of his votes were cast before he ever debated. Why didn't Katie Hobbs debate? Well, because presumably her votes had been harvested before Kari Lake ever picked up steam. Her votes had been harvested that summer. The paradigm window has shifted entirely. Democrats don't need to convince you that their candidate is good. They don't even need to run candidates who speak English or have functional brain stems. They don't need to debate. They can run the cringiest people. 1 in 5 polling locations in Maricopa. 60 vote centers. These are according to the official results. So 20% of the voting locations had issues. Who would that affect? The people who voted by mail, sitting on their asses inside of an apartment building, children's dorm room, or nursing home? Of course not. Those votes were already gathered and tabulated. The system was already wired. That is how it works. Benny, what about Nevada? How can Adam Laxalt, who was a state elected official and who was very popular in that state, lose, yet Joe Lombardo, the governor, the future governor of Nevada, wins by like 7 points? Joe Lombardo is a Republican, and he won in Nevada. And God bless him. Good dude, former cop. Joe Lombardo won, and he won walking away. But Adam Laxalt lost for the Senate. Why is that exactly? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's something called federal-only elections. That's right. Federal-only elections are elections where if there is an undue requirement for citizenship by the state, for instance, voter laws that require you must be a citizen of America to vote, well, then you will get a federal-only ballot, and you'll be able to vote only in federal elections. This is why you see a discrepancy on statewide races sometimes for states with strict voter ID laws, where the federal Democrat candidates outperform. Nevada is a perfect example of this. The state candidates. Did you know this? That our federal government's laws supersede state laws as it pertains to election. Thus why they want H.R. 1 to pass. So they can universally mail every voter in America a ballot for federal elections, at the very least. State elections are controlled on a state level. Federal elections are controlled by the federal government. And you wonder why they want 5 million, 10 million, 20 million new people to flood our country through open borders. Do you see how the math makes sense? Remember, I was born in 1986, and in the year of my birth, California was a red state. California was a bright red, Ronald Reagan voting state in the year of my birth. Mail-in balloting, federal elections, illegal immigration, and messaging to minority communities lead to massive Democrat swings in these places. And that is why the border is open. In case you were wondering, it's a numbers game. It has nothing to do with the quality of the candidates. It has nothing to do with functional brainstems in our candidates. It has everything to do with the federal-only ballots. It doesn't even have to do with your citizenship. Federal-only ballots getting mailed out. We have the article here. Arizona voter registration requires proof of citizenship. The federal form does not. Some voters in Arizona will only be able to vote for president and congressional candidates. Interesting. Their ballots will not list any state legislative races or county races, but they will be able to vote for federal candidates. Therefore, their ballots can go be harvested and collected, and you can get the federal only candidates elected. This is how Catherine Cortez Masto wins in Nevada, even when a Republican soundly becomes governor by 6 or 7 points. Joe Lombardo crushed. We must understand these systems in order to win, ladies and gentlemen. And the federal only ballot that does not require proof of citizenship, which is insane, will absolutely be the death of the Republican Party federally. As we know, Republican Party may be able to win in the states, but as you see in these House races, the lack of proof of citizenship, federal only balloting, mail-in voting, meaning there's as many ballots as there are voters out there, and then the harvesting of those, which Democrats are light years ahead of us. They implemented it in 2018. By the way, in case you're wondering if COVID is a part of this, yes, COVID was used as a cudgel in order to get this law passed by idiot Republicans in these states that are suicidal. But the Democrats have been pushing this for decades. Decades. This is the same playbook. This is an Eric Holder playbook to push mail-in voting. When Nancy Pelosi got the gavel in 2018, before anyone knew what a COVID-19 was, one of her first bills on the floor was permanent mail-in voting. That's before COVID. This has been the game for a very long time. We have to open our eyes and start to think about these things in reality if we wish to change them and ever win again. Up to 1,000 Arizona voters were mistakenly sent ballots with only federal races. Here's why and what's next. This is an example of what happens when you're shipping out 2 different ballots and one has absolutely no citizenship requirements. Go.
Learning about an issue impacting 6,000 voters in Arizona. Secretary of State Katie Hobbs confirming some voters will receive a mail ballot with only federal races. That error has to do with driver's license records verifying citizenship. The system failed to properly verify, leading it to think the voter can only vote in federal races. So the voters impacted should check their email and check their mail for that updated ballot.
It's 5.
These are the issues at hand. These are the issues that will collapse our republic. It does not have to do with fraud. It has to do with the understanding of the balloting mechanisms and the legalized harvesting of ballots from brain-dead people to elect brain-dead candidates. It has to do with things that seem profoundly un-American. Nate Cohn is the data analyst at the New York Times. And Nate Cohn had this to say in a quite viral tweet this weekend. Democrats are winning the post-election vote. The post-election vote. Well, that seems very undemocratic. This is the party that clamors on and is now doing victory laps about saving democracy and how they saved democracy. The thing that keeps Democrats' hopes alive is that they are gaining in the post-election vote in most districts. Expect that headline to be the headline in every single presidential race from here until the rest of your life. Expect that headline to be the headline in every major federal contest from here until the end of your life, as long as these systems remain. Because what happens when you have the permanent and unlimited number of ballots and an unlimited capacity to go harvest those ballots is that Republicans on the current system will never win again. The current system says drive Republicans to the polls on election day. That is the current system. And that number will never outnumber months of harvesting ballots and shoving them into drop boxes. Okay? I cannot be more clear on that. Republicans have to change the way that we think about elections in these places and the way that we reach voters and message to voters in these elections and our infrastructure. Will Republicans change? Well, now this is the second question as to how we got screwed and betrayed in this election. The reality, and the harsh reality at that, is our leadership in the Republican Party would much rather be in a permanent minority position, yet still have power, than have to contend with MAGA and America First candidates that were elected successfully, giving them a majority, and that is betrayal. Mitch McConnell spent nearly $10 million in Alaska promoting Senator Murkowski, who is a pro-abortion, votes with the Dems, votes against Brett Kavanaugh, votes to impeach Donald Trump, anti-pseudo-Republican. Mitch McConnell spent millions on her race and did not drop a dime to help Blake Masters in a very winnable race in Arizona. The reason why was that he would rather have Mitch McConnell made the cold-hearted, corrupt, corporatist, uniparty decision to support his own power, even if it is in the minority, than to be the majority leader with someone like Blake Masters in his caucus who he disagrees with. He made the same calculation in New Hampshire. He did not help out Don Baldock in a very winnable race in New Hampshire. He made the same calculation in Pennsylvania. And he made the same calculation in Nevada. We should be up 4 seats in the Senate right now. Had we leadership that decided that serving the Republican Party and serving the bosses, which is us, the people, the only reason you have power, you work for us. He decided against it. The people own these candidates. You are owned, Mitch McConnell, by the electorate who gives you power. And I tell you this, I am against Mitch McConnell, and I am against Kevin McCarthy, because I am for meritocracy. And the meritocracy on its face, even if they had funded these candidates, they deserve to lose their power positions. And we're going to get into leadership races here in just a second. But let me state this. As a conservative, you must be for meritocracy. That is an absolute prerequisite to our worldview. That hard work is what matters, not your skin color, not who your daddy was, not where you come from. Hard work and your record is what matters. And so, not understanding the way that these races were run, it is your sole responsibility as the leader of the party in the Senate and the leader of the party in the House, and Ronna McDaniel, I lump you in on this, and Ronna McDaniel needs to go as well. She is the chairwoman of the GOP, of the RNC. Not understanding how these measures work, not deploying people into the field in order to gather ballots where legal, in order to knock doors on Republican households where legal, and assist in the delivery of those ballots if need be. Not able to build the infrastructure that lost us 2020 and that lost us 2022. Do not be able to change anything from the year 2020 to the year 2022. Republicans lose in 2018, they lose in 2020, they lose in 2022. People blame Trump for this. Poppycock. Bull. It is not Trump's fault. It is not his responsibility to run our elections as a party. He does not get paid by the party. Donald Trump holds no elected position right now. Sure, there is tertiary blame for specific races or specific things. Some candidates may not be strong. Maybe Donald Trump didn't help out enough from his own Save America PAC. Donald Trump is sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars. But it is not his responsibility to get Republicans elected right now. Donald Trump could, by all right, sit there and drink a Diet Coke and hit long piss missiles at his golf club day and night and not care about the Republican Party one iota. That is his right. It is not his responsibility. It is the responsibility of Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Ronna McDaniel to figure out these systems. And we give them hundreds of millions of dollars to figure this stuff out. And they did not lift a finger. They did not fire a warning shot. They never once talked about mail-in balloting and ballot harvesting. They never once went to these districts and encouraged Republicans to vote early and sent people into the field to assist in the capturing of ballots where it was legal. Nothing. For that reason alone, they should be kicked out. Yet, here we have the Republican Senate leaders going to plow forward with a leadership vote, spitting in your face, even though a preponderance of the caucus is calling for them to delay this vote, including Rick Scott. Listen.
I know that you have been circulating a letter along with Senator Ron Johnson, pressing colleagues to sign on to a postponement of next week's elections in terms of leadership positions. But top senators are saying they're going to push forward, even though the ink is not even dry. What are your thoughts on the elections next week?
Well, first off, it doesn't make any sense. So I've been in the Senate for 4 years. I'm a business guy. And here's what I've watched. In business, you have a plan. You know your numbers. All right. I've been up here 4 years. What is our plan? It's like Stephen Miller talked about. What is our plan? What are we running on? What do we stand for? What are we hell-bent to get done? There's no plan to do that. The leadership in the Republican Senate says, no, you cannot have a plan. We're just going to run against how bad the Democrats are. And actually then they cave into the Democrats. And then now they want to rush through an election. We haven't even finished what's happened in Georgia. My focus is to make sure Herschel wins, and I hope everybody helps Herschel. You can go to teamherschel.com to help, teamherschel.com. But they want to rush through an election because, they don't want to do any assessment of what we've done wrong. Insanity is doing the exact same thing and thinking you're going to get a different result. We won't.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Nothing will change, and we will lose permanently and forever if you keep McCarthy, McConnell, and McDaniel. Matt Gaetz tweeted, McCarthy, McDaniel, McConnell, McFailure. Let's get that tweet up. And he's right, damn it. These people have betrayed us for the last time. And while Democrats hacked the voting systems and these voting cycles, and Democrats legally, I cannot state it enough. It pains me to say it. But they have legal systems in these states. They have worked on this for decades. As many ballots into the hands of voters as possible, and the mechanisms to pick up those ballots. It is legal in those states. We put the articles up. We put the numbers up. We put the laws up. You can see it and read it and weep, and I certainly do. But the reality was that Kari Lake probably lost before any single Republican showed up on election day. It's very sad because I really love Kari Lake. Adam Laxalt lost before anyone showed up on voting day. John Fetterman won before anyone showed up on election day. Because of the broken systems inside of the Republican Party, this is betrayal for them not understanding this. And then for them not funding MAGA candidates and at least trying to play in these systems, in these places, like in Arizona, spending multi-millions in Alaska in order to help out some freak pro-abortion stooge, bug-eyed weirdo, Murkowski, backstabbing your own party into permanent minority status instead of having to deal with a vocal base majority. And what they are doing right now to the MAGA movement is exactly what they did to the Tea Party movement. Tea Party had one good election, and then after a time, they were able to whittle them down and crush them. And the Uniparty won. And they are now trying to do that with MAGA. McCarthy, McConnell, McDaniel, McFailure. Senate GOP leaders are pushing forward with a plan to hold leadership elections next week, even as a growing number of Republicans demand a delay. Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, Rick Scott are circulating a letter pressing colleagues to sign on to a postponement of leadership elections scheduled Wednesday morning. The movement signals growing discontent with Senate GOP over increased likelihood that the party remains in the minority next year. This article was clearly written. Democrats will have the majority next year. Very sad. We are disappointed that the red wave failed to materialize, and there are multiple reasons it did not, senators say in their letter, first obtained by Politico. We need to have a serious discussion with our conference as to why and what we can do to improve our chances in 2024. As McConnell seeks to break former Senator Mike Mansfield's mark on longest-serving party leader, he's facing fresh questions from at least half a dozen Republicans, Ted Cruz included, who will serve as the Senate leader next year. Cynthia Lummis, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley. These are big household names, and they are saying we need to second-guess McCarthy. Eric Schmidt, who is Senator-elect from Missouri, saying we need new leadership, calling for McCarthy to get out. Blake Masters and Don Bolduc, who lost in their races because they did not get a penny in funding from McCarthy, said they also want McCarthy out. Vindictive old Galapagos turtle shell. This man deserves to rot inside of his enclosure at the local zoo, munching on lettuce for the rest of his life. Senator Marsha Blackburn is supportive of Senator Johnson and the Senate Republican Policy Chair, so Marsha Blackburn also joining in. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a cadre of depressing apparatchiks. I regret to inform you that Senator Joni Ernst from my former home state of Iowa is one of them, Barrasso as well, who are uniting around Mitch. And I'm going to call him Mitch McCarthy. Mitch McCarthy is the endemic failure of the Republican Party, and take Ronna McDaniel with you. These people backstabbed America First. They would much rather parlay with Democrats than with MAGA or people of their own party or the base. They despise you. They are repulsed by you, and I have a personal story to tell you. I've never told this story on air, and let it be known that I'm going to start with a laundry list of complaints about those in power in Washington, D.C., because I know them well, and I've been inside those circles. I've gone to their stupid cocktail parties. Back in the day, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I spent 15 years there. I know people on Mitch McConnell's staff. One of the most repulsive things I ever saw was a high-ranking member of Mitch McConnell's staff when I brought him a bottle of bourbon, assuming that, well, you're from Kentucky, wouldn't you like a bottle of bourbon? He outright rejected my gift. We were going to a party with him. I bring him a bottle of bourbon. I thought this would be a friendly gesture. He did work for Mitch McCarthy, after all, Mitch McConnell. He laughed in my face and said, I've never even been to Kentucky. Then he went on to talk about how bourbon is drank by poor people. Then he went on to say he hates the taste of bourbon and that he all but said he hates the people of Kentucky who end up voting his boss power every single year. This was Mitch McConnell's top staffer in Washington, D.C., a top guy. Rejecting my bourbon present because only poor people drink it, laughing about how he's never even been to Kentucky, and repulsively spitting on the voters that give his boss power. This is who Mitch McConnell surrounds himself with. I live down the street from a major bundler for the RNC. Bundlers are people who do the fundraising. They do all the calls with all the rich people, bringing in the RNC. I'm not going to name these people. Probably will come a time where I'll literally name them. We'll see. Certainly, if we gain power over the RNC, I will go through on a very, very short list and say, I know who these people are. The RNC is made up of never-Trumpers, people who hated Donald Trump, and people who hate you. This fundraiser for the RNC, very top position, this is the person who cashes your checks. This person, at a party, laughed and giggled and told me how they lie when people ask them what they do. They say that they are Democrats. They fake that they work for the DNC or that they work for Democrats in the Senate in order to not rub people the wrong way inside of the cocktail circuits in Washington. These are the people who represent you. This is just a small scratching of the surface of stories that I know, that I have personally experienced how the Washington, D.C. elite GOP despises and is repulsed by you. And if you need further evidence of this, more than just anecdotal stories from your boy Benny, here it is. Scott Pressler on Twitter. Scott Pressler on Twitter said that no one in the GOP leadership ever reached out to him to try and to get him to help. Scott Presler is, of course, the magnanimous poll watcher and walker. He is a hero and a legend. He registers Republicans and puts in the hard work on the ground to change hearts and minds. If you're not familiar with Scott's work, please follow him. He is a national treasure to the GOP. Scott Presler is now headed to Georgia to do the same thing, but the Republican Party, the corporatist Republican Party, didn't reach out to him once to try and establish the thing that Democrats have been doing in these states. And the reason why Democrats win the post-election vote is because they have hundreds of thousands of Scott Preslers out there gathering ballots and convincing people to vote Democrat. And we can't even reach out to our famous social media advocate, Scott Presler, who does this for us. The GOP, the National Party, doesn't even reach out to him. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking for a recipe for permanent minority status and for the slow and complete erosion of your red states, because they will then come, they are swiftly coming for Texas. They will implement this in Texas. They will implement the strategy in your state. Then I encourage you to become awake now, to stop just screaming fraud and to start recognizing what election laws look like, how they were passed, and to prevent, perhaps on a federal level, the counting at least of post-election day ballots. It seems undemocratic. It seems bizarro world, third world, fourth world insane. And we actually don't think it's legal. But unfortunately, it's never actually been litigated. Joining me now is our favorite lawyer and somebody who had an interesting tweet on this topic this weekend, Mike Davis. Mike, thanks for being on the program. A dim outlook for Republicans. So much of this seems to be ballot algorithms and the understanding of how elections work in the year 2022. Republicans shoved their head quite literally into their turtle shells, depending on who they were, and didn't do anything to help us win. But you're saying that while early voting may be protected, that late voting seems to be borderline illegal or have no protections, and that what's happening right now certainly shouldn't be allowed. Talk us through this.
Yeah, so under the United States Constitution, we have the Elections Clause, and that's Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1. And what the Elections Clause says is that state legislatures decide the time, place, and manner of federal elections unless that is overridden by Congress. And what Congress has done for the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the federal offices, is Congress sets the day of election for the Tuesday after the first Monday in November for these even-numbered years for House and Senate, and every 4 years for president. And the issue is that if Congress sets election day, how do you have votes that come in after election day? The whole point of Congress setting election day is because back in the late 1800s, the Ku Klux Klan would have different election days for different house races, and it made it where they can go gather votes, and their Klan candidates could win the elections. And so Congress put a stop to that through this federal statute. So that's the question. There is a case from 2000 election in the Fifth Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, that says that essentially that early voting, if you vote before election day, so long as it's the combined acts of the voter and the election official to show that it's a final determination for the election, that was held to be constitutional under the Elections Clause. I don't know if that's right. I think the Supreme Court should resolve that, because we talk about election day. Election day is election day, and it's not election month or election season. But there's a Fifth Circuit case on that's controlling right now. That the issue is what happens when ballots are sent in after election day, that we're seeing all over the country. And we have different laws. We have the Help America Vote Act. We have a statute that deals with overseas voters and military voters. But what about just everyday Americans who are voting after election day? How is that legal under the elections clause and these federal statutes. And that's something that should be resolved.
Mm-hmm. How would it be resolved? Would somebody bring a suit? Like, there are some very smart people on Adam Laxalt's campaign, I'm sure you know them, who are pretty upset at what is happening right now in Nevada. And what happened in Nevada is just 2020 redux, right? Like, we don't learn our lessons. We learn the wrong lessons, I think, often as a Republican Party. And we've spent the last 40 minutes of the show talking through what the realities are. And the realities are is that you're just never going to win. If they can just continue to count votes, and albeit legally, because there are no laws preventing them from harvesting these votes and from casting these votes by mail, if they can continue to count the votes and begin to erode the election day show up for Republicans, then you will never win another federal election where these laws are in place. So what would be the solution here, Mike?
Well, for a legal solution, it would be a candidate who lost because of these late votes. And so if that's an Adam Laxalt or another candidate, if we can show that they lost because they were counting votes if they were counting votes mailed in after election day, that would give that candidate standing to sue in federal court and say that, look, under this federal statute, they can't count these votes after election that were cast after election day. The elections clause of the Constitution trumps any state law that contradicts it, and so therefore these votes should not count. Remember, Democrats pretend like they care about democracy and every vote counting. The Maricopa County voting machines, approximately one third of them went down on election day for many hours. And the Democrats knew that it was Republicans who disproportionately show up on election day instead of early voting. And so they had huge lines, long lines, and people were told to go to other polling places on election day. They showed up to these other polling places. They were already checked in at the prior place, so they could not vote. They were disenfranchised. Senator Mark Kelly opposed a modest request to a court to extend voting hours by a few more hours so those people can vote. Senator Mark Kelly and the Democrats disenfranchised voters. So I don't want to hear them complaining that Republicans are, wanting to disenfranchise voters and Democrats care about democracy and Republicans don't. Democrats only care about power. They only care about winning and power. Republicans need to get out of this mindset that it's their patriotic duty only to show up on election day and wait in a 6-hour line and then not be able to vote because of something that comes up on election day, whether it's a malfunction or they have a personal issue and an emergency that comes up. We need to play by the Democrats' rules, win these elections, and then change these laws so that we do not have election season. We need to have election day. And if there is a good reason why you can't vote on election day, you're military, you're overseas, you're sick, fine. You can put in a request for an absentee ballot, but these all mail ballots, we saw this. I lived in Colorado for 10 years. We saw this in Colorado. Colorado went from a deep red state to a deep blue state because of mail ballots. And like you said, Benny, what happens is the Democrats, it's not about who's the most popular candidate. It's which organization has the better machine to go find these votes and turn them in. We need to win this. We need to do it through the political process, through Congress, through the state legislatures. We also need to do it through the legal process, through these federal statutes and the elections clause.
A 2000 Fifth Circuit case held early voting doesn't violate federal statutes, but according to your tweet, there's absolutely nothing that says that voting after election day is legal, right? This hasn't been decided yet.
For non-military and non-overseas voters, we have UACAVA, which is a federal statute that applies to the uniformed services, the military, public health service, and other the 8 uniformed services in the federal government and their families, along with people who live overseas. Other than those people, late voting is not permitted. So we need to look at that. And what does that mean? Does that mean that the ballot has to be received by the election official by election day? What does it mean to vote on election day? Does it mean that they can get it postmarked on election day, then it shows up 5 days later and they can count it? Or does it mean that it has to be mailed and received by the election official on election day? It certainly means that it can't be postmarked after election day if you're not in the military, if you're not overseas.
That's how it is in Florida. In Florida, you can mail in ballot. You have to request your mail in ballot, but you can get a mail in ballot. Perfectly legal. You just have to go through the proper channels. You can mail it in, but if it doesn't arrive by poll close, it doesn't get counted. That's Florida state law. And
Yeah,
so
every state should move to the Florida model. Every state should move to the Florida model. And for Republican states to have done this by now, they hadn't learned their lesson before. That's just unacceptable. These politicians need to wake up and start changing these election laws so we can have a free and fair election. We saw House Republicans led House Democrats by almost 7 points, a 7-point lead. That is a huge lead among House Republicans, yet we're going to barely win the House of Representatives. We cannot continue under this current system. This is about the Democrats' machine politics. It's not about the will of the American people.
Yes, it's always been about the managerial class and managing your life for you. That is who makes up the Democrat Party. Who makes up the Republican Party, Mike? You've worked with McConnell. You've worked in the Senate. I want your take on this leadership race with the time that you have left.
So I personally, I like McConnell. I worked very closely with him on the judicial fight when I was the chief counsel for nominations to then Chairman Chuck Grassley from our home state of Iowa, Ben. So I've been in the trenches with McConnell. He was rock solid on judges. He was rock solid on Kavanaugh. If Grassley or McConnell flinched in any way on Kavanaugh, we would have lost that nomination. We would have lost the midterm elections in 2018. We would have lost the Supreme Court. We would have lost the country. So it was so critical that they were very firm during that confirmation process, and they were. I'm going to stay out of the current leadership fights in the House and the Senate. I will say that we need change in Washington. We need change in Washington, and we need to start taking seriously these elections, and we need leaders who understand that the voters make the primary decisions, not the leaders. And so if there's a primary decision made by voters, the leaders need to get behind that, because that's what the Republican decision was.
Yeah, it does sound. It seems to me like everyone was caught so flat-footed, and now it is incumbent upon us and the people who have influence and the people who have audiences to start to message to the base exactly what the problems were. However, that's not my job, right? I don't run the NRCC. And Mike, I know you only have like 2 minutes left here, but I don't run the NRSC. It shouldn't be our research job to go through and research all these states. We did every state. We looked at every state law, and we said, wow, these states have mail-in voting. These states have ballot harvesting, legal ballot harvesting. Nobody on a level, and I remember this when Pennsylvania went to universal mail-in voting, right? Which, of course, collapsed Pennsylvania. John Fetterman won before anyone cast a ballot on Election Day. I mean, that's just clear in the data. You can just see it. The vast majority of his votes came before Election Day. Nobody raised the alarm inside of the corporate GOP. No one. Your thoughts on our path forward? It seems like we need to get deeply serious people who understand these mechanics if we ever hope to win federally again.
I think that, and I would love to recruit Harmeet Dillon to have a very senior role at the Republican National Committee. She is a hard-charging lawyer. She lives out in California. Maybe we can convince her and her husband to move to D.C. for a couple of years to take a top role at the RNC. She's a good election lawyer. She's great on TV. She's a warrior, and we need someone with Harmeet Dillon's mindset at the RNC so we can rebuild the party operation to the reality that we have today, which is election season, not election day. When we show up on election day with our lawyers and our voters, the election's already lost. You already pointed that out with Fetterman. We need to get serious about winning elections like the Democrats do.
Yeah, that's right. Mike's a very serious person. I hope that job maybe falls to you, Mike. Who knows? I love Harmeet too, but who knows? And then please move the RNC to Florida, damn it. Why is the RNC in D.C.? It doesn't make any sense. Move it to Florida. Tampa's a nice place.
That's a very good question.
God bless you, Mike.
That's a very
Thank
good
you.
question. Thank you, Ben.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the show. We're going to give you the hard facts. We're going to give you the straight dish. We are going to chop wood here, and we're going to be honest with you about the realities. Also, because of you and because of your support, we have a research team here. We have a production team here. We can go through and look through these laws. We can give you all of the data and the information that you need to be smart and to demand better of your class, your political class, and the elites that think that they run your life, but you actually run them. And if you want to continue to run them and you want to continue to support shows like ours, please subscribe to our podcast. Please consider subscribing to the show. click like and click subscribe on the social media platform that you're watching on right now. We appreciate very much your viewership. We do this show for you. We are not owned by any corporation or any massive news conglomerate. We do this show specifically for you, and that is why there's no one pulling our strings. There's no McCarthy people in our ear screaming at us about leadership races, and no McConnell people in our ear, screaming at us about this or that. It's not owned by them. They are owned by us. We're in charge. They answer to us. You are in control. And if you wish to stay in control, please subscribe to our show, because we are going to have one hell of a battle over the next 2 years for the future of this nation. And we will be there fighting right alongside with you, including fighting some of the incredible fraud that is happening. Real fraud. Now, this is the real fraud, okay? So I've been telling you there are legal, dangerous balloting and election rules, but they are legal. They're on the books. We looked them up. We looked up state laws. They're on the books in these states. There's real fraud that actually happened that affected this election. And that fraud was FTX, crypto exchange, ladies and gentlemen. The FTX crypto exchange, a guy named Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried. This guy, scum, he took a multi-billion-dollar cryptocurrency company, and he essentially embezzled money from the people who were banking their crypto with him and gave it to Democrats. And then he collapsed his company into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Scum. He's the second largest Democrat donor, one of the second largest donors in America this cycle, second only to George Soros. He was Joe Biden's second largest donor, if that tells you anything. And then when FTX customers tried to remove their funds, shockingly, last week, they didn't have any funds to pay out. It was revealed that FTX had partnered with Ukraine to process donations to their war efforts within days of Joe Biden pledging billions in American taxpayer dollars to the country. This from the Post-Millennial. Ukraine invested in FTX as a Biden administration funneled funds to the invaded nation, and FTX made massive donations to Democrats in the United States. This was a Ponzi scheme. This was created in order to fund Democrat candidates out of your bank accounts. They stole from you. If you're into crypto, this is what happened. This scum, Sam Bankman-Fried, who should hopefully and prayerfully go to jail for the rest of his life, this incel jackwad made donations to Democrats that totaled $40 million, putting him behind George Soros only this cycle. How's that for being the party of the people, the party of the dispossessed? Yes. Your party is completely funded by repulsive billionaires. 40 million, George Soros gave 128 million. And you know where that money went? Instead of when you donate to Republicans, it goes to these greasy consultants who then steal all your money. That's what happens inside the Republican Party, and we will cover that on a different day. Believe that the consultant class of the Republican Party are as big of criminals as anyone in this nation. What happens for Democrats? Well, possibly the same thing, but also they invest in ground games to go pick up these ballots and to go place these ballots into the election boxes. That's what they do. And you know what? As we listed, it's legal in these states, and that's where this money goes. So the elections are won before the polls open on Election Day. That's how it works. Bloomberg reports Sam Bankman-Fried had his net worth go from $15 billion to $1 billion in the biggest day collapse ever seen among billionaires. The personal loss of funds coincided with FTX implosion. It is expected that Bankman-Fried will go into bankruptcy and face a liquidity crunch and the abrupt change to financial status as he already filed Chapter 11. FTX lost roughly $1 billion of customer funds as the money vanished, causing federal regulators to look into the company. The investigation will be conducted to determine the extent of harm to clients and what laws FTX has broken. Though FTX is not based in the U.S., a move that makes it possible for FTX to skirt U.S. financial regulatory laws. FTX is under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding the management and handling of client funds. In the latest development, FTX has more questions to answer as scrutiny builds around the SEC investigation. Roughly $5 billion was withdrawn from FTX on Sunday. The trouble began for FTX last week when rival crypto company Binance said they were selling off their holdings, and then the collapse continued from there. Ladies and gentlemen, this guy, called a shambolic 30-year-old whiz kid from the New York Post, said to have been worth $16 billion, spent $10 million helping get Biden elected in 2020. What did he support? He supported get out the vote for Democrats. He funded super PACs called Protect Our Future and Guarding Against Pandemics. In case you were wondering if I'm completely correct in what I have told you up to this point, that Democrats focus not on the individual voter, but on the ballot mechanisms and the ballot algorithms. This left-wing incel doofus, his parents are Democrat activists, LOL. They work for Stanford Law, LOL. They are Democrats who raised a reported $140 million to get out the vote. In case you're wondering if I'm 100% correct. Democrats invest in get out the vote, and that get out the vote is not about election day, it's about the election months leading up to election day, so that they win elections before the elections even happen. Here's Sam Bankman-Fried with Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. This is the fraudulence of the left. The left say that Tony Blair is a peacemaker, Bill Clinton is a feminist, and that Sam Bankman-Fried is a philanthropist. No, this guy's a criminal. This guy was invited to crypto summits and had glitzy TV ads and social media videos. He was even, and this will come as absolutely zero shock to any of you watching, lauded by the World Economic Forum. That's right. FTX, World Economic Forum, in a page that has now been taken down. FTX was a partner with the World Economic Forum. In case you're wondering if everything around you is fraudulent, and if everything around you is run by the most corrupt group of virtue signaling incels and repulsive criminals like Bill Clinton, these people, the elections in America are run by the Sam Bankman-Fried class. These people are garbage, and until we start to focus in on the fraudulence, because this is real fraud, right? This is securities fraud. This man is stealing. Sam Bankman-Fried needs to go to prison for the rest of his life inside of Guantanamo Bay, punching license plates. This scumbag embezzled bank accounts of Americans and then handed them to the Democrat Party. Where is the outrage? Where's the calls for investigation? They call to investigate Elon Trump every second of every day. I'm sorry, Elon Musk, and Trump. Mitch McCarthy, Elon Trump, whatever, man. Put them all together. Trump probably announcing tomorrow. And Trump getting a weird endorsement from an unlikely source, Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live. Dave Chappelle had this to say about Donald Trump and why he gained power. And we thought it was poignant. It was thoughtful. It was esoteric, as Dave Chappelle often is. And it was actual comedy based on reality. And Dave Chappelle speaking for the voice of the millions in America who have no voice. Dave Chappelle lives in Ohio. He lives in a rural part of Ohio. And he explains Trump's rise thusly. Very well done. Watch. Fraudulence, ladies and gentlemen. And perfectly stated from Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle talking about one side of the coin and us on this show talking about the other side. What they are doing is written into law. You cannot say it's illegal because it's not. Donald Trump doesn't pay his taxes? Okay. We'll stop making loopholes for billionaires in the tax codes. Well, if they did that, then they wouldn't be getting the Sam Bankman-Fried checks every single election cycle and the George Soros checks. Ban foreign billionaires from spending money in our election. Oh, we can't do that. We hate the billionaire class, but we can't do that. We wouldn't get any funding. You can't complain about a system without understanding how that system works and who it's benefiting. And you can't complain about the 2022 election results without setting yourself about changing these systems or changing the way we use these systems, more importantly, as a party. And that is what we're going to do on this show. This show is going to be your go-to spot for 2024 and what the Republican Party is doing to modernize, change, fight, and win. Donald Trump may be announcing tomorrow at Mar-a-Lago. Everyone we talk to says yes, he is announcing his run for president tomorrow. Will Ron DeSantis announce? We don't know. We don't have any determination from Ron DeSantis' team. We're very close with both teams. As we said on Friday, we wish them both well, and we see them both as kaiju. One is King Kong and one is Godzilla, and they must fight, if indeed they decide to fight. Ron DeSantis may not run for president. We don't know. We don't know. And anybody who tells you they know otherwise is lying. There's only one person who really helps Ron DeSantis make his political calculations, and I can tell you this. It's his wife, Casey. He loves his wife very much. They make choices as a team, and Ron DeSantis will decide. I think based on his family and based on what I know, what's best for him and his career and his family and all that bundled together. The other message from DeSantis' world is don't expect some type of monstrous clash just yet. Ron DeSantis will not be responding to Trump. Trump attacked DeSantis in a preemptive attack. We didn't think it was smart. We don't want mommy and daddy to fight. King Kong, Godzilla right now. Announce you're running. Take it to the primary voters. Ultimately, you're in charge. As Mike Davis just said on this show, you need to respect the votes of the base and the people who show up. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to have a party because then those people are going to feel betrayed. I know there's a lot of people who feel betrayed out there right now from our Republican establishment, and you damn well have a right to. But you also have a right to know that there are people like our show who are out fighting for your future and doing the hard work to fix what happened in 2022 and to make operational manifestation gains to fix what happened and then to advance, to be on offense. We do not want to have this feeling in our gut that all is lost, and we don't. This country is a country that is founded on Judeo-Christian principles and on the principles of us being a nation of law and order and faith. There have been very bad times in this country's past. In fact, if you look at Dred Scott cases and if you look at the Jim Crow laws, Democrats have been trying to meddle with elections in their favor forever. Forever. Doesn't matter. Barack Obama talked about it when he was running in 2008. We'll pull that clip for tomorrow's show. Nothing is new under the sun. And so you must keep the faith. And if you are a believer in a almighty creator, then you have to put your faith in him and not in man. Do not put your faith in Mitch McConnell. Do not put your faith in Kevin McCarthy. Do not put your faith in these flawed people. This place has always been fallen. So it is time for us to say a silent prayer, live with open eyes, and to use our energy to fix what is broken. It was never an easy fight in America. It wasn't easy for George Washington. It wasn't easy for Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't easy during World War I or II or the Civil War. None of it was ever easy, and a lot of people had it a lot harder than we do today. So no more dooming and no more black pilling. You'll get red pills on this program. And while Republican leadership may have to choke them down, we will tell you how we fix this. And we will go about the process of doing that and pushing that today, now, starting. The weeping and the crying and the salt, ladies and gentlemen, must continue to flow. but from the other side as we advance and we take on the challenges before us. We do it because we have our priorities in order on the show: God, family, country. We do it because we're free men and women. We're going to stay that way, and we're only going to stay that way because we fight. And that's what we'll do on this program. Your boy Benny, ladies and gentlemen, we'll fight right alongside with you. God bless you. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show.